Liza Drains Joe, by Magnus Magneto, commissioned by Urzacoms. It was another typical Thursday evening for Joe. He had just returned from the gym, and while he hadn't achieved any personal bests, he hadn't lost any progress either, which was a win in his book. Joe was a little surprised that his girlfriend Liza wasn't in front of her computer. Normally, she would be too busy streaming now to pay him any attention, even if she only had single-digit or 0 views. Instead, Liza was sitting on the couch, wearing a black tank top that contrasted against her pale skin and tight jeans that hugged her thin legs. His eyes stared at her cleavage for a few moments, the prized possession on her body that she unsuccessfully tried to leverage in her streaming career. Both Liza and Joe were below average height for their genders, standing at 5'2" and 5'7" respectively, and they had slender frames too. But while Liza was considered skinny fat, Joe weighed 161 pounds of lean muscle. Joe hoped that the pump from the gym would impress her, but instead he was met with Liza saying, "I can't believe you've been working out every week for over 3 years since we've been together and you're still so unimpressive." "Hey, what do you mean by unimpressive?" Joe flexed his arms. A pair of hard, sizable biceps popped up. He had measured them at a little over 15 inches before, and he was more muscled than the average man on the street. Liza rolled her eyes. "I've seen so many guys on the internet get way bigger muscles than that, and it didn't take most of them 3 years. They're on steroids and stuff. Plus, I have a hard time gaining weight, you know that." "Well, whatever. I think that I'm the one who deserves the muscles, and it turns out my biggest fan thinks so too." "What in the world are you talking about?" "Check this out," Liza said with a smug smirk before grabbing onto Joe's arms. She closed her eyes and performed a mental chant. Joe stared with disbelief at her for a few seconds until her hands lit up. Moments later, he felt something horrible, as if his energy itself was being drained away. Looking down, he realized that he was very slowly shrinking, while Liza was conversely growing. For the next few moments, Joe was too shocked to do anything, while around 8 pounds of lean muscle and an inch of height were stolen. After coming to, he shook her grip off and took a step backward. Liza finally opened her eyes, which immediately widened with glee. "Yes, it worked!" She flexed her biceps. Instead of the soft, mushy arms she used to possess, a hard, shapely muscle rose up on her command. Her shoulders now had visible striations to them, too. Above her cleavage, hints of muscled definition peeked through, while her tank top rose an inch higher, revealing a flat midriff instead of her former small roll of flab. Her jeans had become painfully tight as well, rising a bit above her ankle now, but she was too excited to care. Joe shouted, What the fuck was that?" "A magic spell. One of my viewers said if I have latent magical abilities, then I could use it to steal muscles and height. Turns out I do." Joe's head was spinning. "What? You heard me. Now stand still so I can steal more." "You want more?" "Yes," Liza replied hungrily, taking a step towards him. This is just temporary, right? Like tomorrow or something we'll switch back to how we were?" Liza laughed cruelly. "Of course not. What would be the point unless it's permanent?" Liza, you can just lift weights with me. I'll bring you to the gym and show you what to do." She scoffed. "Why would I want to do that when I can take your muscles?" "Because I'm your boyfriend. You should want me to be buff." Liza shrugged. "To be honest, I'd rather just have the muscles on me." Really?" She nodded and said, "Just let me take a little more. You're a man, so you can build more muscle faster than I can anyways." "Not necessarily. It took me 3 whole years just to get what I have." She shrugged again. "Well, you can get it back. Now let me get some more." Before Joe could reply, she put her hands on his arms and began chanting the spell in her head, focusing on draining his muscle. "Okay, just a little bit, right?" Liza ignored him, instead fixating entirely on the spell. She flared her will, making the rate of transfer faster than the first time she tried it. Over the next 10 seconds, Joe's muscles rapidly deflated, a full inch of circumference flowing from his biceps into hers, the rest of their muscles exchanging proportionately as well. Joe pulled away. "Hey, that was more than a little bit. Stop it." Wordlessly, Liza wrapped her arms around him in as hard of a hug she possibly could and resumed the spell, specifically focusing on his muscles. The muscle flowed faster than ever, Joe's shoulders visibly narrowing with each passing second, while hers broadened. He desperately tried to break free from her grasp, but it became increasingly impossible to with every moment. "Liza, please," he said weakly, while his very life essence was drained away. Joe's pleas only angered Liza, strengthening her resolve. Soon their bodies were equally muscular, and moments later she was stronger all over. "Gimme that!" she squealed, reveling in another burst of growth. When Liza finally let go, her and Joe had fully reversed their starting muscularity. Her tank top now strained against her shoulders and back muscles. She proudly raised her arms and flexed them, watching with glee as rock-hard peaks rose at her command. She ran her hands across her new six-pack abs that jut out through her top, before squatting down to feel her thighs, jeans splitting apart at the seams from her enlarged thighs pushing against them. "Fuck yes," she exclaimed. "I'm so hot now." Joe, standing feebly as his own tank top hung loosely from his slender, weak form, watched with horror and fascination. Years of consistent exercise and healthy eating had vanished from his form, transferred entirely to his girlfriend. Most troublesome of all for him, he felt a massive, involuntary erection from staring at her new body. "All right, good," Liza started. "Now I need to make my legs nice and long to match all this new muscle." Joe turned away from Liza and started to run towards the door, but she pursued. Her larger, stronger thighs quickly overtook him, and she wrapped her arms around him once more, accidentally squeezing the air out of his lungs with strength she wasn't used to. Liza activated the magic again, this time focusing on taking Joe's height for herself. There was nothing Joe could do but watch with horror as his perspective shifted downward, while Liza grew taller with every stolen inch. As Joe's height drained away, Liza's legs lengthened, her jeans continuing to split apart as they could no longer contain her newly sculpted, muscular thighs and calves. Her torso stretched out as well, further accentuating her toned abs and impressive chest. She became several inches taller than Joe, who now looked up at her with a mixture of fear and awe. Finally, Liza released Joe, allowing him to collapse to the floor, gasping for air. She stood there, admiring her new form, confident and powerful. "Wow, I look amazing!" she exclaimed, her voice now deeper and more commanding. "All I have to do is steal some boobies from other women and I'll be perfect." Joe stared at her, feeling an intense mixture of anger, sadness, and attraction. "Liza, please, you have to change me back. This isn't fair." Liza contemplated his request for a moment before shaking her head. "No, I think I'll keep it for now. But don't worry, Joe. You can still go to the gym and work on getting those muscles back. Maybe you'll even catch up to me one day." She laughed, her voice echoing through the room, filling Joe with a sense of despair. "Though," she started again, looking down at him, "I think I should take a little more from you." "No, please, just use the ability on someone else." "That's a great idea," Liza cheered. "But I'm going to need a final boost to make sure that nobody can escape from me." Before Joe could protest or attempt to flee, Liza grabbed onto him once more. She closed her eyes, focusing her magical energy on extracting the last bits of strength and height from her weakened boyfriend. Joe's body shrank even more, his muscles disappearing almost entirely. As the transfer continued, Joe's wrist, now fragile, couldn't handle the pressure from Liza's increasingly strong grip. He screamed in pain as he heard something snap, prompting Liza to finally release him. "Oh, I broke your wrist, you poor whittle thing. You're so fucking puny now," she laughed cruelly. "It's okay though, Mommy Liza is going to take care of everything now," she said before leaning down and kissing the injury, as if that could possibly help it. "I really want to take more, but then you might die," she laughed. He stared with horror, awestruck at how casually and callously she could laugh about his life potentially ending. Turning her attention away from Joe completely, she headed towards the mirror, admiring her new body. Reduced to little more than a skeleton, Joe now weighed less than half of what he used to. He stared with horror and arousal at Liza's new form. She was now much bigger than he ever was, while he was smaller than her starting size today. She turned back to Joe and said, "Sucks you were too pathetic to give me more than this, but that's okay. Now I have the strength to go use this spell on real men at the gym and take all the power and muscle I deserve. Just how much is that? Guess you'll have to just sit here and jerk off thinking about what that's gonna look like while I'm out taking it. That is, if you even have enough strength to do that. She laughed even harder before turning towards the door. No time to waste. I need to go become the goddess I've always dreamed of being. As Liza left the apartment, her powerful footsteps echoed through the hallway. Joe laid on the floor, feeling defeated and helpless. He knew there was nothing he could do aside from sit there fantasizing about what would happen next. To be continued.